Today's interview was brought to you by the Australian Brahman Breeders Association in recognition of the 75th year since the formation of the association on the 7th of October 1946. The association and the breed continues to thrive and grow, and many of these stories, past and present, should be recorded for future generations to enjoy. Today, Kay Becker is speaking with Wilma Warcon about her 21 years at Cherokee Stud.
Wilma really needs no introduction to the Brahman industry. She started with the Cherokee Stud back in 1973, and anyone who's followed the Brahman industry over the years in Australia will know that Cherokee was registered number 3 stud, and Wilma started there in 1973, so she was there through the high days of Cherokee and their successes over the years. Morning, Wilma.
Good morning, Kay.
It's lovely to have you. You now work at the Brahman Breeders and have been there since about 2006, so I guess there's not a lot about Brahman cattle and Brahman breeders that you don't know, but today we're going to focus on your time at Cherokee. As I said, you started in 1973. Can you just tell us what you started out doing when you went there?
I was an office girl.
Yeah.
Office got boring. Wanted to go down to the cows, so anyway, ended up going down to the cattle and working with the girls, Dawn and Diane Williams. They were the twins that Mr. Delandles had working for them.
And so, paint a picture of Mr. Delandles as the man that you worked for. He was regarded as sort of larger than life and a bit on the eccentric side, I guess. Within the industry, he was certainly well ahead of his time in the way he thought things should happen. Was that what he was like to work for, or was he just like every other person that you'd ever worked for?
Well, he was my first boss, so straight out of school and into working for him. He did love the old antique stuff and so forth. I was also his driver. He had Citrons and Rolls Royces and Jeeps and so forth, and I would drive him and Mrs. Delandles wherever they went, go on trips. And he did joke around a bit. There were some visitors one day and he was working in the garden, and the visitors came up and they were saying it was a beautiful place, nicely set up, and they said, "Are you the gardener?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm the gardener." And these are the sort of things that,
Yeah, so you got down into the amongst the cattle, and I guess you were worked more closely then with their stud cattle and their show teams and stuff like that. What was your introduction to that? Like you said, you're straight out of school. Had you grown up around cattle, and so you sort of knew a bit, or was he your grounding board and your teacher for your then lifelong passion in the industry?
Yeah, he was my teacher. I was a bookworm before that.
I'm sure there were some days you wished you'd stayed a bookworm.
It was interesting. You had the dairy cattle, you had foster calves, or they weaned calves and they wanted to show them. You would then put them onto dairy cows, and you sort of learnt that, and how about weaning and feeding, and you learnt a bit.
Yeah. He would have been a great teacher. So, like I said, he was well ahead of his time in the way he wanted to do things and the way he did things. You were probably lucky he lived a little closer to town than a lot of people who had as many cattle and had the ideas and thoughts that he had. So, where was your first stud showing that you went with him thinking, wow, this is serious now, we're in the show ring here and this has all got to work right?
Okay, it was in 1977 when he went into the show ring. They asked, it was a special event in 1977 for the Brahman, so he was asked to go back in. So anyway, that's was my first experience and last experience at showing cattle.
Now, why was that? Did you not like it, or did Mr. DeLandles decide that was he knew why he'd got out of it in the first place?
It was good. He only went back for the special event where he took out the grand champion and everything. You know, he took out the good prize with old Sleepy Eye, the bull called Cherokee Sleepy Eye.
Yeah.
And so he went back in just to
do that.
Just to win that grand championship.
Yeah. And so over the years he put together some pretty substantial cattle, and Cherokee cattle became fairly sought after from within the breed. Do you remember him going away to sales and bringing home, and buying bulls? Did you go with him to do that? Over the years you became fairly involved in Cherokee, and obviously he had a lot of faith in your ability to do the job and your eye for cattle. So did you start out with him in the early days doing that, or did that happen later in life?
That happened later in life. He never ever went out that much and bought cattle in. I remember him and Lindsay Stone going to a sale, and they wanted this particular cow. So then I'd get a phone call and say, "Oh, we bought you a cow." But I'd have to foot the bill. And it was a Banyaksuka cow, and then her calf brought a fair few dollars when he was able to be sold. He did go out one stage, and Tiagra was having a sale of females, and he bought a few females from them to help. But later on in life, then I went overseas to buy cattle.
Yep. That would have been, an exciting time. So obviously to the States, I'm assuming you went and bought the cattle. And so did you go on your own, or did he go with you, or was there an entourage of you?
Well, it started off, it was Alistair Hughes, and Alistair just got married, and we had to fly out the next day or the next week. So you more or less say, I went on Alistair and Donna's honeymoon with them. So, we flew out, and Alistair led the way and I followed, and Mr. DeLandle's last words to Alistair was, "Don't let her into Mexico."
Oh, he's a bit of a killjoy, wasn't he? So, I guess the base then of the Cherokee herd must have been, from the initial days, he just kept improving that herd as he went. A lot of the studs along the way started out and then brought in, new genetics, fresh lines of cattle. That doesn't appear to be the way he wanted to do business. He clearly believed in his own product. So over the time, he would have sold a lot of bulls to lots of different people. Did those people come to you at Cherokee to do that, or did you go to sales, like the Brahman week bull sale?
No, I myself never went to a Brahman week sale.
Gosh.
Yeah, never went to one. And it was more or less preparing our bulls. Yeah. And, how do you put it? He more or less bred cattle to suit his herd.
Yep.
And then when the imported stuff come in, he knew then he had to get out and bring in new stock, and that was back in 1984, I think he then had to bring in the new stock.
And so, the new stock again? Did you go back to the States and bring those in?
Yeah, we went over. He and George Jacobs brought out a couple of bulls, I believe, and that was in one importation. And then we went in 1985, flew to America then, and we travelled around different studs, picked out different animals that we required, and yes, and that's when we brought back about 24 head or so.
And that would have been a big import in those days of live cattle through Australia to Australia. Again, that would have been a process. I guess you were by this stage fairly well bedded down at Cherokee, and it was. So did you follow the cattle all the way through, or did you get on the plane and say, "I'll pick them up at Cherokee"? They would have to go through quarantine processes. Were you with them the whole way doing that, or you just came home?
We went over and we picked them up, and I called them the two old boys, Phil Hughes and Mr. Dede. They did all the contacts and everything with them over there. So Alistair and I went over, and we just went around the properties, bought the cattle, and sent the message home. And then Alistair went on, finished off his honeymoon.
Without you.
And I came home, and then we just had to sit and wait. And yeah, they kept in contact.
Yeah.
With.
I guess that in itself is not the ordinary. A girl out of school who turns up not knowing a lot about cattle in 1973, by 1984, so a bit over 10 years later, you are in the States without the fellow that's paying the bill, and buying his cattle. When you look back on that now, do you think I was in way over my head, or wow, that was an amazing experience?
It was an experience. It was full on,
I can only imagine.
Yeah, and then by the time you got home, you think, oh my goodness, did I just, come from over there to here and, yeah.
Do all of that.
Yeah, and then I think I had to spend an extra night and quarantine in Brisbane. Yeah. Oh, they would. No, it wasn't an extra night. It was. I missed my flight because they held me up in customs.
Yeah.
Because I had a gun holster.
Yeah. Jesus, pistol packing mama.
That was the reason they held me up.
Yeah.
But it was soon as the main guy came across, and when he seen the label on my bag, because I had Cherokee written on the bag, he just said to the blokes, let her through. So that's how much pull the old boy must have had on.
Yeah, amazing. So Cherokee went through, and they did something, that for people who knew Mr. DeLandros probably didn't think it was that much out of the box, but to the rest of the beef industry, you went on to hold a bull sale at the Pilbeam Theatre here in Rockhampton. Now let's paint a picture of this. This is the cultural hub of this city. It's a theatre building, a proper theatre building that normally holds concerts, speech nights, opera, and then he decides he's going to have a bull sale there. What on earth, and what was the preparation that it took to actually do that? That in itself must have been a mammoth task.
It was.
What year was it?
It was 1984.
Mm-hmm.
It was in October. Yeah. 1984. First we had to start off, in come all the calves that he's going to sell, right? They're all 12 to 18 months. That was good. Then in come all the dairy cattle. So we then had to, get the dairy cattle used to our bales and everything. Then we had to get the calves to suck the dairy cows.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we then, that was really something. Because the bales was all cement floors, it was and there was 2 cows, you let one calf in, let him have 2 teats, then take him out and bring another one in.
Yep.
Let him have 2 teats, yeah. So anyway, eventually we got them all sucking off the cows, and there was one particular calf that wouldn't suck.
Yep.
So one day I went into the bales,
Yep.
and he's standing there. So I go over to the cow and pretend I'm sucking the teeth.
Yes.
And then next minute his head comes down and he grabs all the teeth. So these are the things we had to do.
Gosh.
So
And
then...
so these calves were 12 and 18 months old. So, you know...
Oh, well, by the time they were sold, they were about 12 to 18 months
Oh, right.
old. Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then that was okay. So they'd all line up. We'd have to learn to halter them. They'd halter, line them up at one section and then walk them in. Some would pull you in because they wanted milk. So eventually we had enough dairy cows for 1 calf per cow.
Yep.
So then after that it was getting them to walk in pairs.
Mm-hmm.
So we had the halters on them.
So how many calves are we talking, you know?
38.
38. Remember the number vividly, don't you?
So we then started to learn them to walk in pairs. So he built, you know those old bullet, you know those yokes?
Yep.
Yeah.
Bullock yoke.
Yeah, well he'd put them on them.
Yeah.
And then the poor old donkey be in front, and the donkey be pulling the back. Anyway, we gave up on the donkey. And then the bull yoke. And then eventually, we then just got them leading normally then.
Yep. Yep. And so then, you know, that's one thing to have them leading normally down at Cherokee out in the paddock. What was the process to go through to then get them to be able to lead, you know, into the Pilbeam Theatre? You know, we're talking a building. There's no natural light. There's no grass. There's no birds tweeting. How much more effort did it take for that to happen?
Well, we had to do a trial run. We had to put up yards, and we had to do a trial run. Just take them up and tie them to the rails and let them get used to the traffic and the noise and everything. And then just gently bring them in and then just turn around and walk back out, you know.
So that was here in town. You did that here at the back of the Pilbeam Theatre. So for how many days? You know, that wouldn't have happened overnight.
No. We only brought them up for the one day.
For one day.
For one day, and then up went all the panels and everything, the yards, the hay racks, and there was Mark Dillon and Bill Duraloo, and he had a team of workers. And they put up the yards, and then, and so everything sort of just fell into place after all the hard yakka.
So let's step back a bit, I guess. Do you remember him coming and meeting with the Rockhampton City Council, it would have been back then, to ask them, could he use the Pilbeam Theatre to hold a bull sale? Were you part of those conversations, or did he just come home and tell you that was what you had to make happen?
Yeah, it was he, Peter Ward, and Lindsay Stone.
Yep.
They were the ones that, you know, got it all together. And then he told us, you know, we're going to have a sale at the Pilbeam Theatre.
And so did you sell the whole 38 lots on the stage at the
Sold
theatre?
the whole 38.
Yeah. It's just, you know, if you tried to do that today, there'd be a meltdown. So can you remember, what was the average of that sale? What was the top price? It would have been high energy, high octane.
Well, the people that were coming to the sale had to pay $2
Yeah.
to book a seat. And I think, not sure whether Pilbeam Theatre kept the money, but they said it went to a worthy cause.
Yep.
Everyone thing. So, I don't know. It was packed, the Pilbeam Theatre. I'm not sure how many seats it holds. And, now I've gone off. What was the question?
Yeah, what was the top pricing? Can you remember the average of the sale?
I think the top price might have been,
It's a...
44,000.
Which was a hell of a lot of money back in 1984. Who bought the bull for 44,000?
It was Mr. Appleton.
From Clermont. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, he paid that price, so that it was. I think they grossed about 268,000 and averaged 7,052.
Which would have been amazing. So they were 18-month-old, sort of maximum 18-month-old.
Yeah.
That's a young bull by any stretch of the imagination, and would have been very young for back then. Most bulls didn't hit the sale ring in those days until they were at least 4-year-old. So the sale's over. Did you have to load them all back up and go back to Cherokee and deliver it from there, or what?
Yeah,
that was a lot of work to happen in one day to get 38 head onto a stage, sold, off a stage, back into a paddock somewhere. The day must just be so clear in your mind. Did you get home and go, what have we just done?
Yeah. It was. I must admit that the Pilbeam Theatre, it was spectacular.
It would have been.
They come in, of course, we had Dave Watkins, Brian Fanning, Ken McCaffrey. They were the auctioneers.
Yep.
And they had their tails. They wore tails, I think.
Yeah.
The ringmaster, Colin Olive, had tails on. And it was like when they started to get close to the sale time, well, Noel Perry was the MC, Master of Ceremonies, And anyway, they had the birds twittering, Pilbeam Theatre was dark, and the birds started singing out and everything. And then all of a sudden the sun come out.
Wow.
Yeah, so they had like trees and windmills and that, and the sun come out, starting to come out, that's right. And then all of a sudden the fog come in, and up out of the bottom this bull comes up onto stage, up through the floorboards.
Yeah, amazing. It would have been... Yeah, I bet you have. It would have been an amazing experience to be part of. Was there ever any footage or anything kept of it, do you know?
I think so, but in those days it was only videos.
Yeah, it would have been.
Yeah,
been. It would have been an amazing thing. And so, he then held a gala ball, He didn't do anything by halves, really, did he?
No, well, the gala ball was before the Pilbeam.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a heifer to be auctioned off to be donated to Miss Brahman. He had twins working for him, Dawn and Diane Williams.
Yeah.
And they prepared the heifer and everything.
Yeah.
And I think it was Graham Reynolds, one of his welder, made the trailer and everything. And, they wheeled her in on a trailer.
Yeah. He there was not an off button really, was there?
Got to beat the next guy.
Yeah. We probably need a few more like him. So after 1984, what did 1985? Was there? Did he think? Did he come to you and say we're going to do that Pilbeam sale again, or was it a once-off?
No, it was a once-off.
Yep. Yeah.
It was our Ruby anniversary.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's what would have made it, extra special.
Yeah.
So, what sort of staff were involved in that? How many of you were there? Did it seem like there was just a couple of you, or was there a huge team?
It was a huge team, and I'm trying to think now. There's a photo of them, of the staff for that particular year, and I'm trying to think. And there's got to be at least 20.
Yep.
Yeah, 20 people.
That's significant. Would have been significant staff.
Yeah.
Again, we're talking 1984, so it's over 30 years ago. Getting closer to 40 years ago. So that would have been a huge effort. So 1985 rolls around. Is it just back to business as normal? Did you go back to the States and bring more cattle in? You just concentrated solely on the breeding.
Breeding of the overseas cattle. So there was a big AI program went on then.
So just to paint a picture for people who don't know, explain exactly where Cherokee is or was in relation to Rockhampton.
Okay, funny you should ask that, because there was a gentleman the other day said he never ever went to Cherokee, and he asked me where it was, because now he's I can't tell you who he is, but I better not say on.
Yeah.
And going, if you leave Rockhampton and going over the old bridge, you head towards Emu Park.
Mm-hmm.
You come to Tanby, Yeppoon turn-off, and you go in there a couple of k's, and there used to be a big arch gate on your right, and it said Kanomi was the name of the property, and you'd go in there. But now it's Big Al, has his turf farm, and then all those, when you get on the Yeppoon Emu Park Road, all those houses that are built, that was all Cherokee.
Yep.
Or Kanomi, I should say. Right down to the airstrip at Emu Park, and over to the while you're at the causeway, and you're there at the fish and chip shop, well, over the other side of the causeway, when property went down.
So it was a significant land holding. And so Cherokee was the stud name. Do you know where that came from?
That I do not know.
No, it was just,
His daughter Elsie might know.
Yeah. And so from there you went to Alarm Creek?
Yes.
Yep. And did they transfer the stud to there too? Or did you?
Yes, everything went to Alarm Creek.
Yeah, yep. And that time again would have been, that would have been a big enough deal in its own, transferring all of that to Alarm Creek. Then the stud, was it wound up then from Alarm Creek?
From Alarm Creek, but Elsie is sort of involved now with Jessie Ziske, with some of her cattle.
Yep.
And her and Jessie run them together. Jessie's down at Gympie. His father was Cedric Ziske, was a very good friend of the old, I shouldn't say the old boy, Mr. Delaney.
That's probably what he was referred to by lots of people. So, interestingly enough, did you only ever call him Mr. DeLandles? Never called him Lionel? You always referred to him as Mr. DeLandles?
No, we called him Mr. D.
And did Mr. D?
Yeah, but
Yep.
just say the D, forget the Landles. Yeah, we just called him Mr. D. Everyone called him Mr. D.
Yeah.
Even, men at the time older than myself.
He certainly was an interesting character, and his whole demeanour and his whole way of doing business. Now that you're at the Brahman breeders and you're involved with breeding and stuff like that, do you still see names going back through lineages of cattle and that and go, yep, I remember that bull, that was a Cherokee bull? Or has it did the...
Sometimes I need to refresh my memory.
Yep. Yeah.
But when the name comes up, in big lights, well, yes, sorry. Mainly the sires.
Yep.
I remember well. But any progeny of those sires that have been sold and gone to other breeders, I Yeah, you just need to be jogged a bit.
Yep. No, it would have been... So what sort of, talking of a stud herd, again, it was regarded... There was, in those early days, there was a few studs that were regarded as the go-to places for Brahmins, and Cherokee was certainly one of those. What was the stud what were his stud numbers like? Were they, did he have hundreds of cows, or did he have 30 stud cows and 30 bulls, or what made up the...
Well, he bought a property out at Alpha called Sedgeford, and son Ken and his wife Patsy and family went out there, and he owned land around on the Emu Park Road. One section we called Milline, and the other one we call Nankin. He used to grow stuff on Nankin, and he'd have vehicles to fill his silos. So he'd have these tractors, and they would go slashed at this end, hooked up and down the road, and they meet halfway, and that hooks onto another tractor, and off it goes to the silo. He worked it like that.
Yep.
Milline. So eventually he then decided to sell Milline and Nankin and buy a bigger property. Oh, and by the way, the signature was... You always got branded with the LA brand. One day it all went wrong.
I could only imagine.
We had a new girl, and he didn't realise that she didn't have jeans on. She had a sort of nala, and you just feel the heat on, and of course it burnt.
Oh no!
Yeah, or a pan. But anyway, it all worked out in the end. She sort of short jumped off the rails. I think that's why he did it, because she was sitting on the rails. So anyway, he decided then, to send the cattle out there. Well, Lindsay Stones did the counting.
Yes.
And they didn't realise, and there was about 1,200 females put on the Brahman females put on the train, loaded on the train, and went to.
Yeah. And so were they all stud cows? 1,200 stud cows?
1,200 stud cows.
That wouldn't have been an enormous herd by any stretch of the imagination. That's still a big herd in this day and age.
Yeah, and he still had stud cows back here.
Yeah. He and so what sort of numbers of bulls did he have then? To have 1,200 cows, you've got a significant line of stud bulls.
Yeah, at least 20 size, I guess.
Yep.
But, yeah.
So of those 20 size, how many were imported?
None were imported when he did that.
When
he went to Sedgeford. None were imported.
Yeah.
It was after that.
After going to Sedgeford, he started the importation. So yeah, it was he was a big concern for a long time, and he certainly was well remembered, and is well remembered within the breed for his what he did for it, I guess, but also for those little quirky things, a la a bull saddle at the Pilbeam Theatre. That's probably never been really repeated since to the same degree in the 75 years of the Brahman breed here in Australia. Wilma, is there anything else you'd like to add to the story? It's certainly, I'm sure you could tell stories all day about it, because there would have been 1,000 of them over the time. But are there any more that come to mind that you'd love to share with us?
Oh, no, I'd have to say it's the way I see it, and then tell you the rest of the story.
Well, that is your story. It is your story, and the way you see it is probably the accurate story.
No, we had, we'd fly out. His daughter Alison was a vet. When we had Sedgeford, we had to go out and bleed all the cattle. Yeah. So he'd fly us out, we'd land, do the cattle. One particular time we were coming home, and we had this gentleman with us, Jack Lingard, And the pilot fell in love with a couple of girls out there. That's what yeah. So we're coming home, and the his daughter's sitting in the back of the plane, and she's got all the bottle of blood on her lap. And Jack Lingard's riding shoddy in the plane. And anyway, the plane dropped, and of course Jack is deaf. See? And he just felt the plane drop, and we looked at each other, and his daughter Alison holding on to the blood bottle. And I'm thinking, we ain't going back to do it again. So what happened was the pilot forgot to switch the tanks over.
Oh.
So we reckon he was in love with the Jillaroos back there on the property.
It's good. Not the best way to get back to see them, but anyway.
Yeah, it was, a lot of things happened, a lot of funny things. The one thing Mr. D, he hopped on a plane in Brisbane. Oh no, Rockhampton. And it must have come through from Cairns. And he walks onto the plane, and this hostess calls him, "Well, hello, Mr. Brahman." You know, and he didn't know from Barzat, but you know. Yeah. So anyway, he got called Mr. Brahman.
Yeah.
So he got a bit of a kick out of that.
Yeah. I was going to say, that's the calibre of the man. The air hostess, doesn't even really know who he is, or he know her, but yeah. So did they also have a commercial herd? They must have had a fairly substantial commercial herd also.
Yeah, they did. I think they bought the commercial herd with the property. I'm not sure of the exact count of thing, but yeah, they had a commercial herd, I remember. Oh, that's right. And then when he'd fly in, someone had to go down and meet him at the airstrip. And anyway, one day they sent me down on the bike, because it's very sandy country. And I had to go down to the airstrip. I forget what it was for exactly. So I got to the sand bit on this, just on the trail bike or whatever it is. And I started making goanna tracks. Because I got stuck in, the sand. It was... And then you sort of get frightened and you're not going back and doing that again.
No. We'll take a vehicle next time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, these dairy cows from the sale, they all went out west.
Oh, that would have been a bit sad.
So they went out west, and we had to go looking for them. Well, we rode miles and miles and miles, just like, it was 120,000 acres of property, and it had 2 outstations. And
yeah, it would have been completely different operation than what you were used to back here on the coast.
Yeah, it was different altogether.
And so when did you finish up with them at Cherokee and the Delandles?
I think it was around 89, around about then.
Yep.
I think that's...
So you weren't around for Beef 91 for him to help with Beef 91 and Cherokee?
No. I'm trying to think now, and could have my dates wrong. I remember coming to they had a big function out here in the car park of the Pilbeam Theatre.
Yep. They did.
There was some function.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, up to...
That was 91, I think. Yes.
91.
Yeah.
And no, I don't think it was showed cattle that year.
No.
No, it was just that 1977.
Yeah, no.
Because he was asked to come back.
So, no more stories you'd like to share with us?
Well, I could share a whole heap, but
I'm sure
I might
you could.
be talking out of school.
Yep. No, that's fine. So, Wilma, it's been great to speak with you. The history that you've got with one of the oldest studs in the country is something that you're lucky to have, and I think the Brahman breeders in general are lucky to have someone of your calibre who loves it, who loves the industry and has the stories to tell on board. So thanks very much for your chat.
Thank you.